at, even for a small town, I know. And so I'm so much looking forward to what the two of you are going to talk about right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just as a little background, I had the privilege and honor of being at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for about 16 years, and that's where I had the joy of meeting Diane, and I led our national effort, $250 million effort to bring palliative medicine in the mainstream. And that really was a wonderful social, medical, other movement, and it's really gotten some traction legs. And you know what motivated it was we brought joy and meaning in people's lives, both patients, families, as well as physicians and nurses and others. And then it turned my attention now to the world of patient safety. When the IOM report came out, who else? You have to pay attention to that. And so anyway, we're here today. I'm delighted that Dan could join us from China, Maine. He drove down on just late last night. And I'll tell you how we got this session, thought about this session today. The inception of it was back in April when I had the pleasure of spending time at the annual meeting of a group called Maine Quality Counts. How many are from Mainers here? There we go, good contingent. And I was so impressed with this group of people that there were 783 people that came together in April in Maine for this annual event. And I had the pleasure of meeting Dan, who is chair of the board of Maine Quality Counts. That's what he does in his spare time. And I was so impressed with how he was trying to manage and balance the health care of his employees with all the other things. And there are very few people who work in these positions of government, whether local, state, or national, who really have a sense of health care as Dan does through Maine Quality Counts. And so we thought it would be a great venue to launch our discussion, to bring these conversations into, I think, Vikas, you said yesterday, civil society. How do we bring them out to the public? So Dan, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
So Dan, tell us about Maine Quality Counts. What is it?
Maine Quality Counts is a multi-stakeholder collaborative in Maine, and I represent, as board chair, consumers in that group. And a primary focus of Quality Counts is on quality improvement initiatives. Some of the initiatives that the Maine Quality Counts is involved in currently are through the kindness of Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Aligning Forces for Quality, the Patient Center Medical Home Pilot, community care teams, the integration of behavioral health and physical health, and Choosing Wisely. There's many others, but those are some of the main ones.
So you're working on Choosing Wisely up in Maine.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you were at a point where you're identifying the top 5 things that you would work on in Maine. Is that sort of unfolding?
It is, and we have an individual here that is working in Maine on the Choosing Wisely campaign, Kelly.
Yeah. Wonderful. Now, you have a real job, though, and that's as town manager of this beautiful community, and it's right here on Google Maps, and it's just north of, how far is it from Augusta, Dan?
It's about 12 miles northeast of Augusta and 12 miles southeast of Waterville.
There we go, and then here's a little bit closer, here's the town, and here's this beautiful lake here called China Lake. Just to give you a sense, and so you can see how rural this community is. And there's a picture of it. And that's Dan's office. This is real life, ladies and gentlemen. So Dan, tell us about how big China, Maine is.
China, Maine is 4,300 year-round residents. In Maine, there are only about 25 municipalities that have over 6,500 people. So it's one of a group of many, over 450 like China, Maine, in Maine.
And I was looking on Saturday night at the National League of Cities. There's more than 2,000 communities around the country that are small like China, Maine. But you have a lot of healthcare issues that you have to deal with in terms of dollars and cents. In fact, one of the things that really struck me at the Maine Quality Counts meeting was when you said in your opening remarks, now this was really stunning to me, in a community that small, and you had 11 employees at that time?
Yes.
that you were spending $200,000 a year just on health insurance premiums for those 11 employees.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh my goodness, just for 11 people.
The 11 people were 200,000, and of those 11, there were several of them who only had a single subscription, health care.
No, they were a single person, they weren't.
Yeah,
they had
single
dependents,
person.
Yeah.
They didn't have either a significant other or dependent children. So if they were all in the category of having dependents, it would have increased the premiums by about $60,000 or $65,000 more.
So $265,000 to cover about 11 people in a rural community in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the median household income in China, Maine. It was about $50,000. So we're talking about a huge chunk. This is real money. And that's if all employees had dependents. The cost would be about $23,000 per employee. Just enormous sums of money. So Dan, we talked about this conversation and how we want to make the invisible visible. Now, there are trade-offs made every day. So if we're spending up to $23,000 per employee for health insurance, there's a lot of other things that you have to do as a manager in your community. And there are trade-offs that you have to make every single day, every single budget. And I just want to do a quick detour, 700 miles south to suburban New York, which is where I grew up. This is my grade school, the Schubert School, about a half a mile from my house. And I'll even show you my kindergarten classroom. It's right here. Mrs. Damon. And I remember on Christmas, she sent a Christmas card to all the kids with a little mustard seed in it, with a parable of the mustard seed. So this beautiful school, the school had to close, along with another school in our town of about 26,000 people. That year, health insurance premiums in this school district had gone up 27% in 1 year. Enormous sums of money for communities that are not huge, even if they're big. And this is really interesting. So what happens when you have to cut budgets? And so I don't live in this town anymore. My mother passed away in 2006, and we sold the house, and that was it. But I have some nostalgia, so I go back and I check in to see how life has changed. And so what do the kids do to save their after-school music programs and sports programs? They started fundraising. And one of the fundraisers they did is they went out and they collected used shoes. It turns out you can make some money. So these kids raised $6,200 by collecting 15,500 pairs of used shoes weighing more than 7 tons to keep their after-school programs, because healthcare was eating into the school budget. And this is a picture of the truck that came to carry away the shoes. And by the way, you can see that the trailer is from Maine, and you can bet that they're going up to Maine to be processed. And then they're resold somehow. This is what's happening in the day-to-day. These buildings look nice, we drive through our towns, but what's really happening underneath? These invisible decisions that are being made because of how we're spending money on healthcare. Yeah, and last year 15 teachers were laid off, and what's going to happen in the future? And meanwhile, as I was hearing about all of this, you hear the Department of Labor reports about how employment has gotten better and people are being employed in the health sector. Well, if you don't have a growing economy, if you have growth in employment in healthcare, it means you're taking jobs from one place and just giving it to another. It's just reshuffling the deck chairs. I rob Peter to pay Paul. What do you do for a living? So this is what we're doing. We're just reshuffling. We don't, in an absence of a really, growing economy. So back to China, Maine. So Dan, we've been talking about the trade-offs that you as a town manager have to make sure you account for the health and safety of your 4,300 people who live in your community. Tell us about some of those. Oh, and by the way, let me just say, Don Berwick kind of set us up for this yesterday. I don't know if you caught this line, but he was looking at the state budget. How many of you caught that? And he says every line item has gone down in the past 10 years, while healthcare has increased 59%. That's happening all over. And by the way, if we keep doing what we're doing, this is an old, forgive me, I don't have an updated one from the CBO, and this is probably moderated since healthcare spending has moderated in the last couple of years. Based on historical spending trends, according to the CBO, this was an Appendix D of an old report, we'll be spending 99% of our GDP on healthcare by 2082. Why? Because there's nothing to stop it. These are really, really important conversations we have to have about resource allocation. So Dan, tell us about some of the trade-offs that you're having to make every day.
Well, to respond to that question, a couple of things come to mind. In the last decade, the healthcare costs in China have gone up 152%, when the budget for that same period, the gross budget, went up 41%. So you can see that there needs to be some trade-offs when one area of a budget consumes more than the other areas. So as a result, and I might say that healthcare costs or healthcare benefits are the last items that an entity will touch. They will decrease other budgets, other areas of budgets. They will try to be more efficient as possible, and so forth. So a couple examples would be, up till now, we used to overlay or resurface our roads in China every 8 years, up to about 3 years ago. And now those roads, that pavement schedule is being bumped to 10 and 11 years. And what you see in this picture is what we call crack seal. So we fill the cracks in the road to extend the life of the road for a few years until we can overlay it. And if we don't fill those cracks, the water will get in, it'll freeze, and it'll continue to deteriorate the road. And that's particularly important in China to have safe roads, because between 84 and 87% of those people who live in China and are employed, they work outside of China. And they travel to work all hours of the day and night. So you can see there's a trade-off there.
You know, David, when I saw this, I thought, well, this looks like a nice bucolic road, in rural Maine. And I never knew what those squiggly lines were until I figured out this is like putting masking tape. If the foundation of your house is cracking, and you put masking tape on those cracks until you have the money to go in and repair it, and meanwhile the cracks get bigger and bigger and the water comes in.
Yes.
So these are some of the trade-offs. But you also talked about some like the fire department and some essential equipment that you wish that you had but don't.
I think everybody might remember the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Well, because of that, and only because of that, and in some successful grant applications, we were able to upgrade some of our equipment. Had that not come along, we would have been using 1970s vintage fire pumper tankers. And I just remember the other day where one of our volunteer fire department chiefs came to the select board and announced that they were buying a used truck from another fire department in Pennsylvania, and it was going to be a significant upgrade. And that purchase was a 1985 pumper tanker. So it was a great upgrade. But some of the other things that happened...
There was a safety equipment that you were talking about. This sounds like it's really an extraordinary safety thing for firefighters in your community.
Yes, and up until another successful grant application, we were using 20-plus-year-old SCBA equipment. If you don't know what that is, it's self-contained breathing apparatus equipment, and firefighters use that when they go into the fire. And some of the 20-year-old equipment, for instance, will have a gauge that you look at on your arm or your waist that tells you how much oxygen is left in the tanks, or it'll tell you how long you've been in there, and you're only supposed to stay in so long, so you have to keep an eye on that so you can exit the fire, and others can relieve you and go in. But you can imagine when somebody goes in and they're crawling on their hands and knees, and it's all smoke all around, you know, how are they going to discern what's going on with that gauge, etc. And we were able to replace it with the new equipment because of the ARRA funds, where that information will be digitally displayed on the insides of the mask that the firefighters use. So we had been, up until this last fall, using some of the antiquated equipment. And those are the type of things where, you know, the allocation of resources come in, and sometimes they'll say, well, we can hang on for another year.
Right, and the police, so what's been happening is healthcare's been consuming a larger and larger share of your overall budget, and the other line items have gone down in real terms because of inflation, so this is the consequence. I mean, if it weren't for the federal stimulus money, you'd still be having this old equipment because you couldn't afford it.
Yes, the recreation budget, the police budget, the streetlight budget, and so forth have remained almost flat for 10 years. I mean, the police budget might have gone up 5% in 10 years, so 0.5% a year, and that's because we have to pay our part-time police officer a little bit more each year. But many of the department budgets are roughly equivalent to one subscription of health care for an employee, which is about $20,000.
So your whole Parks and Recreation Department is the equivalent of insurance premium for one person.
Yeah, $20,000. The police budget's $23,000, the cemetery budget's $20,000, and they don't go up.
And last thing, this is a private library in Maine. In China, Maine, you have two sort of private libraries. And one thing you wrote in your email to me is that one of the things the citizens would like is, again, this is all done by volunteers and, you know, the beautiful part of America, but the community would love to have bathroom facilities and running water in the library. But maybe that's on the wish list, right?
Yes, they want a centrally located single library that's open more than 11 hours a week.
Right. So the question becomes then, where does all that healthcare money go that's being spent? I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at the blog essays that Dr. Lown has on his website, and they're really exquisite. And I couldn't resist taking an excerpt from one of them and putting them here, because it really states, you know, what are we doing with, in part, with some, we do some wonderful things. You do some wonderful things every single day. But what else are we doing? And he wrote, in our market culture, the patient looms large as a commodity to be seduced by medicalization, to be showered with drugs, subjected to endless tests, image to expose hidden recesses of anatomy, probed by magical genetic analyses, and salvaged by so-called life-saving interventions. You, the patient, with real or imagined dysfunctional biological machinery, is largely present, but you, the sentient human being, is largely absent. So that's where a lot of this money is being spent on these things, and that's what's the avoidable care is all about. You know, I've given a lot of thought to this topic of overuse, and I don't know, how many of you are cooks? How many of you have ever marinated meat? What's an essential ingredient of marinating meat? You need an acid, like a vinegar or lemon or yogurt, right? What does that do? It tenderizes the meat, right? And how does it tenderize? It literally breaks down the cell structure. It changes the cell composition. And I'm thinking about how our minds have been so affected we're swimming in all of this thing called overuse. And I describe it as our minds have been marinated to believe all of this, to live in it and breathe it. So I wrote in this book, The Treatment Trap, our minds are marinated in news, so-called news, marketing, television dramas, and internet advertising surgery becomes palatable. Do you know, on the internet, we can watch human bodies being cut open in a live broadcast of surgery. It becomes attractive to take a pill advertised on television that has side effects that can kill. Our minds have been reset to believe that it's okay. And we become disconnected from the reality of what we allow others to do to our bodies. You know, one of the things I've struggled with over the last couple of years is, you know, why is it, and this comes out of the safety world, when medical errors first came out back in 2000 with the IOM report, there was some initial pushback, some of you might remember, about errors, but there was such a momentum of people that came out and spoke about the harm from errors. And I haven't seen that yet about overuse. It's a lot harder. Not all overuse causes harm, but some of it does. And so I tried to figure out, why is it so hard to talk about the harm from overuse? And so I picked up the phone one day and I called Dr. Richard Selzer, who he was a surgeon at Yale, and he wrote the wonderful book, Notes on the Art of Surgery. Have any of you ever read his writings? And so I asked him, I said, how can this be? What's going on here? How is it that a surgery can be performed on a patient when it's not necessary? And he thought about it for a minute, and he says, well, we don't see it. And I asked him why. And he said, it's too painful. The things that I've learned from Diane in palliative care and other colleagues in that field, from the patient safety world, is it takes courage to go there and look. And that moment of awakening can be very challenging. As I was saying to Rabbi Edris last night, redemption is possible. We can go there and we can go look and see what it is that we're really doing. And this is how we're spending money. You know, we were saying last night, some of us, that in a lot of communities, healthcare is really good for the economy. It's the only place that might be hiring now. But you know, at some point, there's in economics, some of you took economics courses 101 with a law of diminishing returns, that for each additional dollar that you spent, you get decreasing value. And I think that's what we're see happening with overuse. And at some point, the overuse that harms is actually negative productivity, whether it's days lost from work, opportunity costs, the human suffering. So we have some diminishing returns here, even though it looks like we're creating jobs. Maybe this was meant to be, but when I was preparing these remarks on Saturday night, I have a very boring life, you know, so I was doing this on Saturday night, thinking of all of you. I got a phone call from a gentleman who I'd met a couple weeks prior at a Consumers Union Safe Patient Project 10th anniversary coming together. And he used to be a colonel in the Air Force and fly big planes, like John Nance over here. And he joined the ranks involuntarily of the 11 million long-term unemployed because of harm from overuse. He went in for surgery. He had his prostate removed during a robotic surgery. And I won't go into all the details, but in retrospect, 5 years later, he realizes that he was medically inappropriate, should not have had it, and there were a series of errors in the course of that treatment. And he said, I used to fly the big jumbo jets, but he says, now I can't even go out and mow my lawn. So this overuse does have impacts on our society financially, emotionally, unemployment. This is our human capital. And the irony is we're paying for it. This is what adds up into the part of the health insurance premiums that Dan and other communities and individuals are struggling to pay. I think this is an example of what some have called privatized gain and socialized loss. Society loses something when this happens. And I wrote about that in Medicare Meltdown, how Wall Street and Washington are ruining Medicare and how we can fix it. And finally, this wonderful quote, the reason I found it most transformative in my career, the most transformative work has been talking with patients and family members about their experience of care, good, bad, and in between. And I'll never forget Dee Dee Valier. She's a wife of a gentleman who was on the roof cleaning his gutters, and he fell off and the ladder and broke his leg and hurt his back. He went to the hospital. He was supposed to be in there for 3 days. It turned out 3 months after he got 3 different infections, and her work was instrumental in helping him recover. But they had all these bills coming to their house. And she said something so profound about our system that we just don't see. It's like that water that someone said. We're living in the water. She said they harm you and they bill you for it. And so we pay for it. And she started a group, talking about social movements. They started a little nonprofit called the New AMA, Americans Mad and Angry. So there's something out there in the water. I see Diane shaking her head that we can tap into. I've seen it. I see it every week in my inbox. And that's what I love about this meeting that you've put together. Thank you, Vikas and Shannon. In fact, it's putting my life together with Diane and then Rita Redberg and the Consumers Union leaders, the patient safety. How many of you are from Consumers Union Safe Patient Project? You've done all some transformative work. And so I think we have a moment in time to do something. Social movements are meant to correct things that are not right, and where it begins is through public awareness and dialogue. And that's what this town hall is all about. So I'll stop there, but I'll leave you with this quote to center us on why we're all here and what really matters. I took the liberty of a Gandhi quote. He was writing about businesses and how they should revere their customers. And I just substituted healthcare because it fits so beautifully. And I don't think he'd mind. A patient is the most important person on our premises. He is not dependent on us. We are dependent on him. He is not an interruption in our work. He is the purpose of it. He is not an outsider in our business. He is part of it. We are not doing him a favor by serving him. He is doing us a favor by giving us the opportunity to serve him. Thank you very much. We have 2.5 minutes left if anybody wants to come to the mic. Brian, yes.
I want to congratulate you for having this session. My experience has been very similar. I'm doing work right now, and I mentioned this yesterday. I'm doing work right now in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where average cost per employee is $23,000. That means that for a family, that's a blended rate. So for a family, the combination of the employer contribution, the employee contribution, and the out-of-pocket is running somewhere around 32. Two statistics, one from RAND 2011, over the decade leading up to 2009, 79% of all of the growth in household income, not household income, but the growth in household income, was all absorbed by healthcare. That means that only 21% is available for, the stuff that doesn't matter, like roads and infrastructure and education and everything else. And looking at it a different way, if a company is competing on the international stage, they have to overcome a 9.5-point healthcare disadvantage just to be on a level playing field with their competitors in Australia or Germany or Korea. In my opinion, it's very important to have awareness of the society at large, but individuals are very easy to sway, and they've been very hard to mobilize. And so I've come to the conclusion that really the best strategy is to go to the purchasers and do a very, very good job of trying to mobilize non-healthcare business. There is only one group in America that is more powerful and more influential than the healthcare industry, and that is everybody who's not in the healthcare industry.
Right. There you have it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just add another quick factoid. In Kentucky, all the increase in education spending in the past 20 years, except for 3%, has gone to health care and things for employees and retirees. Only 3% of the increase in spending has gone for the education of children in the past 20 years? Okay, we've got to cut off. We have 16 seconds left. I'm sorry, but maybe during the town hall meeting we can continue. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dan, for coming from
Thank
China,
you.
Maine.
Thank you.